Hey, me again, your enemy of hypocrisy, advocate for intellectual consistency. That's me. Granted, being a human being, I may fall short of those goals myself at times, but it's not from lack of trying. So, wanted to talk some more about what's going on in the news regarding gun control, and especially the most recent efforts by the Democrats in Congress with their little sit-in show they put on. And again, I want to address the hypocrisy of it and either the ignorance or of history or the just the outright hypocrisy that they were exhibiting on behalf of their political goals. You just have to wonder sometimes if these guys know anything about history or just don't care. I'm not sure which it is, or they're so enamored of their power and the potential for gathering more power and influence that they're willing to just tell outright lies or ignore the truth or just kind of skirt over the truth rather than talking to you honestly and openly about what's been happening in our country. What astounded me was the fact that one of the leaders of participants in the civil rights era, going back to the 1950s and 60s here in America, John Lewis, would sit there and demand stricter and more gun control. And the reason this fascinates me is because this man lived through a period in the history of our country, and I was a young lad when this was going on, so I have very vague memories of it. But as a historian, I have read about it. I have actually talked to black men and women who lived through the civil rights era. So I like to think I have some grasp of what was going on. And the thing that we need to be reminded of is that at this time in American history, from the end of the Civil War up through the signing of civil rights legislation in the 60s, there were black codes, there were Jim Crow laws, and in fact, racism was institutionalized. It was the law in many states, not just in the South. I mean, let's be honest here. Come on. Racism was rampant throughout the country. So there were laws in place that said, Mr. and Mrs. Black man and woman, you cannot go in that restaurant. You cannot watch a movie in that theater. You have to use the restroom around the corner. You can't use the one that the white folks use. And that is bad enough in itself. But there was also this attitude that if these blacks didn't stay in their place and do as they were told, why, we were just going to send some folks around and have a talk with them. And the laws in place would not allow legally black men and women to own firearms for their own protection. Now, you might say, well, they could have called the police. They could call for help. They could get help. You do realize that most of the police departments at that time were equally as racist and didn't really care about enforcing the laws that would protect black men and women. They were more interested in enforcing the laws of the state. And if the laws of the state said black men and women can't own firearms, well, then you would enforce that law. Or maybe you were just an outright redneck racist and you just didn't like black folks and you were just going to do whatever you could to beat them down and keep them down. Now, folks, I'm not making this stuff up. You can look it up. Don't trust me. I know a lot of you liberals out there who might see this or think, oh, you're just one of those crazy knuckle-dragging rednecks who likes guns, blah, blah. I don't believe anything you say. Fine. I get it. Don't believe me. Look it up yourself if you have the courage. Look at history. Look at the black codes after the American Civil War. Look at Jim Crow laws after the American Civil War. And look at how blacks were treated and how they were expected to behave. Expected, see? Because, you realize they weren't the equal of us white folks. So they didn't get to have the same rights we did. So at the same time, John Lewis and others are advocating on the floor of Congress for more gun control, they seem to forget about or overlook the history of the black man and woman in this country and what they had to go through to achieve the same civil rights that you and I enjoy. They're Americans, but they weren't treated like Americans. They lived under the same Constitution, but they weren't afforded the same laws. So how do you not see that? How do you pretend that didn't happen? Another thing that drives me nuts is this idea that they say, well, nobody should own guns. Only the police should own guns. Okay, well, let's go with that. Only the police should own guns. Are these the same police, Mr. and Mrs. Liberal American, that you don't trust? The same police who are racist? The same police who beat the black man down for no good reason? The same police who ignore the plight of the black man and the black community? Seriously, do you hear yourselves when you talk? You don't like the police. You don't trust the police. The police are racist, but only the police should have guns. Really? How do you not see this? I've got several sites pulled up that you could see yourself. But again, I know you don't want to believe me. So I would advocate that you look it up yourself. But let's look at some of the reasons that black men and women were not allowed to own weapons. And this dates back to even before the American Civil War here in the United States. But let's just go with stuff that was leading up to the American Civil War and just after. Nat Turner's Rebellion in 1831 in Southampton County, Virginia. Look it up. Well, once that happened, see, even before this, blacks weren't allowed to own weapons, weren't allowed to own firearms, but they used other weapons, axes, sticks, clubs, knives, and with each white family they killed, they would take firearms. And there was much upheaval and uproar in Virginia, and they had to call out the militia to put down this uprising of slaves. And they did, and they hanged a bunch of them. The rest of them got sent back to their plantations. They were severely punished, as you might imagine. But laws were implemented saying, slave owners, your slaves are not allowed to own any kind of weapons, especially firearms. White people didn't want black folks at that time having firearms because they continued to worry about slave uprisings. This is nothing new. This is history, folks. All you got to do is look it up. All right? Let's look at some other stuff here. Here's an article. Armed and Black, the history of African-American self-defense. Okay? I'm going to look at some stuff here, see if I can read something to you real quick. The black tradition of armed self-defense. For more than 100 years, black Americans exemplified the distinction above when it came to gun rights. The paragon of black nonviolence, Martin Luther King Jr., explained it eloquently. Violence exercised merely in self-defense. All societies, from the most primitive to the most cultured and civilized, accept as moral and legal. The principle of self-defense, even involving weapons and bloodshed, has never been condemned, even by Gandhi. And you do know that Martin Luther King had a concealed weapon permit, right? You do know that. So even the advocate of nonviolent resistance acknowledged that people needed to be able to protect themselves, and that included owning firearms. Okay, I mean, how much simpler can I make it for you? Another article, Red Summer. In 1919, white Americans visited awful violence on black Americans. So black Americans decided to fight back. Well, how did they do that? Again, you can read the article, okay? I mean, look it up. I could sit here and read it to you, but you need to do your own research, because if you see this stuff, one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to believe it and accept that maybe guys like me aren't batshit crazy and just trying to make stuff up, or you're just going to continue to ignore the facts because it clashes with your worldview. You have to stop reacting emotionally and start using your brain. There are evil people in this world. Those evil people don't obey laws. They don't care about your sensitivity. They don't care about your safety. They don't care about the laws that you want to see in place. That's why they're called criminals. They ignore the laws. The only thing, the only people that are going to be affected by more and stricter gun laws are people like you and me, people who obey the law, people who don't see jail as an occupational hazard. So explain to me how you think more gun control, stricter gun control, over and above the 20,000 plus laws we currently have, is going to make any difference. Explain to me how you don't trust the police, how you think the police are racist, how you think the police are trying to keep the black man down, and then you turn around and tell us that only the police should have weapons. Do you understand why I might be a little confused by this? I mean, guys, you got to think this through. So, again, I'm posting this in the hopes that I may encourage one or two of you to actually look some stuff up, read it, know something about history, and maybe you'll understand why guys like me say that people like even you should be allowed to own firearms. Look at some of the stories about lynchings in the South after the Civil War. You see photographs. You can Google it. Just Google the word lynching and see the photographs that pop up. Pictures of one or two black men hanging from a tree with a group of 50 or 60 or 100 white people standing around them. If those black men had been allowed to own firearms, if those black men had a weapon with a 30-round magazine, do you think they'd be hanging from that tree? I know this is gruesome. I know you don't want to think about this stuff. I know it creates a harsh reality for you, but you need to think about it. Bad things happen to good people. If those good people are disarmed, then they become victims. If they are armed, they're less likely to become victims. There are no guarantees in this world. I'm not going to sit here for 1 second and try to convince you that simply by owning a firearm, nothing bad is ever going to happen to you. Even police officers, one of the first things, I know you probably won't believe this, but I was in a police academy in Richmond years ago. One of the first things they told us was, once you put on that uniform and put that gun on your side, that doesn't mean there's an invisible shield around you. You can still get shot. You can still get hurt. There's no guarantee. But if you have access to and are allowed to carry a firearm, you are certainly less likely to become a victim, just as your house is less likely to burn to the ground if you have a fire extinguisher in your house. Instead of calling the fire department, waiting for them to get there while the house continues to burn, you can call the fire department, and while they're on the way, you can try to put it out before it gets bigger. You see how this works? The same applies to firearms. So guys, when you Democrats, liberals, when you start hollering about gun control and you start screaming about how the people should be allowed to own certain weapons, think about what you're saying and think about who it's going to affect. It's not just going to affect those white folks. It's going to affect black people. It's going to affect liberals. It's going to affect Hispanics. It's going to affect gay people. It's going to affect anyone and everyone that you know. Think about it.